My girlfriend Michelle and I had recently moved out of my mother's house. We actually didn't mind living there very much, although my mother could be quite annoying. We did have a degree of privacy when we were locked away in my room for hours on end. I loved my girlfriend very much, and even though we had only been together for a year, we had been friends since high school. It took me longer than I cared to admit to realize that she was the perfect girl for me. We were young, but we both made decent money working for the same company, so we decided to take the leap of faith and fly the coop. We got a call that our apartment was ready one afternoon after work. Although Michelle had told me multiple times that we should have everything packed so we'd be ready when we get the call, I was a procrastinator and didn't listen. We only had one room that needed to be packed because everything else belonged to my mother. It took us about 2 days to have everything ready to go. We were moving into a third-floor apartment, so the move was grueling to say the least. Thankfully, we didn't have too many heavy things since we had never lived on our own before. The move took a couple of hours, and that night we slept in our brand new apartment without any incident. The following morning is when we did most of the unpacking, since we were way too exhausted to do so the night before. I woke up and turned around and noticed that my girlfriend was no longer in bed. She must be off to an early start, I thought to myself. I got out of bed and put on some shorts and walked out into the living room. The aroma of pancakes and bacon filled the air. She knew this was my favorite breakfast. I didn't see her in the kitchen, so I turned the corner to see her lifting a box up onto a shelf of a closet we have in the hallway. I quickly started to rush over to help. "Honey, that must be heavy. Let me get that for you."
No, I've got it,"
she said. With one last hard push, the box disappeared into the closet.
"Breakfast is ready. I made your favorite."
She ran over and gave me a hug and a kiss. I remember thinking that I could not have found a better girl to spend the rest of my life with. The next couple of months flew by, and everything was going fantastic. We loved having our own personal space and being able to have company over at our own leisure. Summer turned to fall and fall turned to winter. During winter, we would not turn the heat on in fear of raising the electricity bill. We were young and living on our own after all. Most nights consisted of my girlfriend huddling very close to me in order to try to stay warm. She would press her body up against my back and sometimes throw her arm over me. She wasn't the tossing and turning type, so she would stay like that all night long. One freezing cold winter night, we were following our regular bedtime routine, which normally always ended with us getting in bed together. On this night, I was finished and laying in bed, yet my girlfriend was not in the bedroom yet. I found this pretty unusual, so I got up to check on her. I opened the bedroom just in time to see the hallway light turn off and her come around the corner. "What's going on?" I said, wondering what she was up to this late at night.
"Nothing, just making sure the door was locked,"
she said with a smile so beautiful it made me forget all about why I questioned her. It was always a highlight of my day to watch her change into her pajamas and see her brown curly hair hit the pillow and have her big brown eyes be the last thing I see before I turn the lights out for the night. It was particularly cold that night, so once again we fell asleep in the usual position with her arm over my body. At some point in the middle of the night, I awoke for a second and noticed that her arm was no longer on me. It isn't like her to move much at night, so I turned towards her to make sure she was okay, and I noticed she was already awake. I looked over at the clock and saw that it was 3:45 a.m. "Hey, are you okay?" I said in a raspy voice. She let out a small gasp, surprised that I was awake.
"Oh, yeah, I'm fine."
"Are you sure? Why are you awake?"
"I had this weird dream, and when I woke up, I think I saw something at the window."
"What did you see?"
"I couldn't really tell. It just looked like a shadow through the curtains. It was kind of shaped like a person."
"We're on the 3rd floor, hon. That's almost impossible."
"Yeah, almost. Can you check for me, please?"
"All right," I sighed. Our window had curtains that we hung up to keep the light out because there were no blinds up when we moved in, and we never got around to buying any. I got out of bed and groggily walked over to the window. The two long curtains came down over the window. I moved the curtain on the right to the side and tried to look outside. The window was completely fogged over, and I could not see the outside world at all, despite there being a faint glow from the streetlight that I knew was a couple yards away across the street. I let the curtain fall back down and turned to my frightened girlfriend. "See, nothing to worry about,"
You didn't check the other side.
she said in a small voice. I glanced at her and turned around, growing more exhausted and annoyed by the second. I moved the left curtain and once again tried to see outside, knowing full well that I wouldn't be able to. I began to let the curtain go when out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a clear spot in the window. I let the curtain fall immediately, and after a short pause, quickly walked back to the bed and got under the covers.
What happened? Did you see something?
No, I'm just cold. It took quite a while for me to fall back to sleep that night, but surprisingly, Michelle fell back to sleep almost instantly. In the morning, when she was out of the room, I quickly went to the window and pulled back the left curtain as quickly as I could, as if I was going to catch whatever made the handprint in broad daylight. There was nothing there. I allowed myself to write the event off as a figment of my imagination. I was just tired, I thought to myself. A few days passed and I let that night and what I saw fade from my memory. That night we were watching a scary movie right before bed, but we were both tired and had to work in the morning, so we decided to cut it short and go to bed. We both fell asleep without any issues. In the middle of the night, I woke up with the sudden urge to use the bathroom. I got up and quietly did my business. As I walked back in the room, I noticed that the room was darker than it normally is. Our curtains were pretty thin, so the light from the pole across the street normally bled through and prevented the room from ever being pitch black. But this time, it was. I looked towards the window, wondering if maybe the light pole had stopped working. At that very moment, I saw what looked like the shadow of something huge, with two incredibly long arms and long, messy hair. I almost immediately turned on the light, disregarding my sleeping girlfriend. She awoke in a daze.
What the hell? Turn the light off.
Oh shit. Sorry. I reached for the light switch slowly while keeping my eyes glued to the window. I hesitantly turned the light off, and I was relieved to see that the dim light from across the street lightly showered the room once again. While still a little shaken up, I laid back in bed with a major case of cold sweats. I don't remember when, but I must have finally fallen asleep at some point because I awoke to the sound of my alarm for work. I looked to my right and my girlfriend was already out of bed. I got up and quickly got dressed for work. On the car ride to work, I decided to bring up what I saw last night.
That's insane. Just like you said, we're on the 3rd floor. You were probably just imagining things because of the movie we watched.
Yeah, maybe. But you saw something at the window a couple of weeks ago too, remember?
Yes, but I was imagining it. You checked and didn't see anything, and it helped me calm down.
What if I did see something?
What? What do you mean?
I saw a handprint on the window. I didn't want to scare you at the time, but you were right.
You saw a handprint and you didn't tell me?
Look, I'm sorry, but if I told you, it would have just scared you more. We were pulling into work as I finished my sentence. She remained silent with an upset look on her face. As soon as I put the car in park, she swung the door open, got out and slammed it shut. I got out and called her name, but she quickly walked into the building, and by the time I got to the door, she was gone. I didn't see her for the rest of the day, which was unusual. Normally, we crossed paths a couple of times, but not on this day. At the end of the day, I stopped by her desk, but she was already gone. I was going to wait for her in the parking lot, but when I walked outside, she was already standing next to the car, looking just as upset as she was this morning. The car ride felt painfully long, and it was extremely quiet. We arrived at our apartment, and I decided to break the silence. "Hey, hun, I'm pretty hungry. What's for dinner today?"
Nothing.
she said coldly. "All right, well, I'm gonna go pick something up then. Do you want anything?" My question was answered with the slam of our bedroom door. I'm surprised she would even want to be in there, alone, considering what I admitted to seeing last night. I decided to go to a restaurant and eat alone. It was better than being home and getting the silent treatment. By the time I got back home, it was getting late, and I was ready for bed. I took a shower and got ready to head to the bedroom, but when I tried the door, it was locked. I knocked on the door. "Oh, come on, let me in. I'm sorry." I waited for about 30 seconds, and just as I was about to give up, I heard the doorknob jiggle and the door cracked open. I pushed the door open just in time to see her crawl into bed and cover her whole body with the blanket. I paused for a moment, thinking about what I could possibly say to get her to stop being angry at me. I came up dry and flipped the light switch off. The light from across the street once again washed over the room as I got under the covers and laid staring at the ceiling. "I love you," I said lightly with an apologetic tone.
I love you too.
With a smile, I drifted off to sleep. An unknown amount of time passed and I awoke to this overwhelming cold. If it's this cold in here, I can only imagine how it must feel outside, I thought to myself. As I removed the blanket to get out of bed, the cold took my breath away. I crossed my arms and held myself tight. I started making my way towards the door when I heard something. The sound of flapping, like a flag on a pole in the wind. I turned slowly to see something that made absolutely no sense to me. Our bedroom window was wide open. The sound was our curtains flowing back and forth with the occasional whipping sound when the wind blew particularly hard. I didn't know what to do or what to think. Once again, I flipped the light on as fast as I could. "Did you open the window?" I said in a frantic tone.
Huh? Ugh, why is the light on?
"Did you open the window?"
No, I didn't. This isn't funny. Turn off the light.
"What? I didn't open it."
Well, it wasn't me, so close it and turn the light off.
I walked towards the window slowly. The wind had calmed down and the curtains were now covering the opening. I pulled both curtains back slowly and peeked outside. Once again, I saw the trees and light pole. As I pulled the window shut, I saw something float down slowly towards my feet. I took a quick step back, not knowing what it was at first. I bent down to get a closer look and saw what it was. It was a clump of black hair. I got absolutely no sleep that night. As soon as the sun came up, I called in to work. I told them that I wasn't going to make it in and started packing my things. I must have been making quite a bit of noise because my girlfriend woke up and started questioning me immediately.
What are you doing? Where are you going?
"I can't stay here anymore. I'm driving myself crazy. I can't get any sleep here. Not after what I saw last night."
Here we go again. Look, I'm serious. This needs to...
"I'm serious. I didn't open that window last night, and when I closed the window, something fell inside."
What was it?
"It was a clump of black hair. It looks really old and damaged."
Well, what did you do with it? I'm gonna need some proof.
I gestured for her to follow me to the windowsill where I had left the clump of hair in fear of touching it. I pulled the curtain back to expose the spot where I know for a fact that I had left it. There was nothing there. I left it right here. What the hell?
I'm not dealing with this anymore. I don't know if you're trying to scare me or not, but I think you should leave.
It's not safe here. I'm trying to.
Leave.
My now ex-girlfriend left the house to allow me time to gather my things. I grabbed all of my boxes out of the hallway closet except the one Michelle had shoved up onto the shelf. I made what felt like the longest car ride ever back to my mother's house. I didn't go into much detail with her about what happened between me and my ex, but she was gracious enough to allow me to stay in my old room until I found a place to go. A few weeks passed and I desperately tried to get in contact with Michelle a few times to apologize and maybe work things out. Unfortunately, she had deleted all of her social media accounts and changed her phone number. She must really think I'm crazy, I remember thinking to myself. The weeks turned to months and I was trying very hard to find a place to live so I could leave my mother's house again. But it felt nearly impossible on my income alone. I started to fall into a depression. My thoughts were constantly flooded with what I could have done differently in order to keep her. I even tried stopping by our old apartment despite my fear of being there, but I was greeted by completely new residents and was forced to apologize and tell them I had the wrong place. My friends must have taken notice that I was being distant because the three of them showed up one Saturday night and demanded that I go out with them and that they were not leaving until I did. After some pep talks and a couple of drinks, they managed to convince me to go along with them. They took me to a bar that I knew they went frequently, but I was never much of a party animal, so this was my first time. I quickly became the only sober one left in the group, as the rest of the guys downed too many drinks to count. I was having plenty of fun watching them make fools out of themselves and getting rejected by countless females, but I noticed it was getting late and I contemplated leaving. I took a quick look around the bar, and that's when I saw her. My heart stopped. Across the room, sitting at the table alone with her back to me, was what I knew had to be her. Beautiful curly brown hair, same body type, familiar taste in clothes. I had to go speak to her. I quickly got up and started across the room, my friends calling my name, wondering what was going on. I walked up behind her and almost placed my hand on her shoulder when she turned around. Although extremely beautiful, it wasn't her. I was left speechless as her light brown eyes seemed to look right through me.
Did you want something?
She said to me with a confused smile on her face. At this point, I had to improvise. I don't think, well, I came over here because I thought you were my ex who left me because she thinks I'm insane would be a very good pickup line. Well, my friends over there told me that I should come over and talk to you. I think you look gorgeous.
Well, that's very sweet, but I'm not really the type to take a random guy from the bar home.
Right. Well, I'm sorry for bothering you. I turned to walk away and saw my friend's eyes were all glued on me. They almost seemed like they were going to laugh at me for being rejected when all of a sudden I felt a tap on my shoulder.
Here,
she said, giving me a piece of paper with her number on it as she made her way towards the door. I called out to her. Hey, can I at least get your name?
Jennifer,
she said in a slightly raised voice, not bothering to turn around. I made my way back to my friends, and after a couple of high fives, we decided to all head home. The next day, I didn't hesitate to call her and set up our first date. A few months passed and we are going strong and steady. It turned out that she was a nurse and was making good money and had a place of her own. She was tired of me living with my mother and asked me to move in with her when she noticed things were going pretty well between us. I was quick to take up her offer. Anything to get out of my mother's house again, and I was happy with my new relationship. Her apartment was very nice. You could instantly tell that it was somewhere that a female lived alone until now. Coincidentally, it was on the 3rd floor, just like my old apartment. The first couple of nights went great as we got settled in together. After a few more days, I started to get this strange feeling. I started to feel like I didn't belong there. Something felt very wrong about being there. It became harder and harder for me to fall asleep at night. Nothing noteworthy had happened at all, and I did a good job at hiding my discomfort from my new partner, but it was there. All of this came to a head one night when me and Jennifer got into a heated argument just before bed. She told me that I was being very distant and that if I didn't want to be there, then I should leave. It almost felt like deja vu. I ended the argument with something I regret saying to this day. She accused me of not wanting to be with her and told me that I didn't love her. And I replied, I like you a lot, but you just aren't her. She knew about my previous relationship, although she did not know why it ended, so this must have cut her very deep. She didn't respond to that. She turned in bed to face the wall, and I could hear her crying, but there was nothing I could say after that to comfort her. So I turned around and laid there thinking until sleep consumed me. I heard a banging sound that jolted me out of my slumber. I quickly noticed that the room was unbelievably cold. It was the middle of summer. It was impossible for it to be that cold in the room at that time of year. I was confused at first, but my confusion quickly turned to dread when I realized that this cold felt familiar. Fear spread to every part of my body. I was paralyzed. Only the sound of a muffled scream was able to spring me out of bed. I got up and spun around quickly to face my soon-to-be ex-girlfriend's side of the bed. Her blankets were completely torn off, and she was not there. I looked up from the bed to see that the window was open, and part of her blanket was hanging over the edge inside the room and was being pulled further out slowly. I rushed over to the window and pulled the curtains to the side. This window also had blinds that had completely fallen off and were now laying on the ground. I grabbed the blanket just as it was about to head over the edge and pulled. I heard another muffled scream. I stuck my head out of the window and I will never forget what I saw. It looked like a woman with extremely long arms and long, messy black hair that looked like she'd been struck by lightning. She had nothing but black holes where her eyes should have been. She had no body below the waist. She was floating just a few feet from the window. Her nails were incredibly long and sharp, and she had dug them into Jennifer's leg. It was dark, but I could see that there was blood dripping from her face and leg. The other hand of the creature was covering her mouth, muffling any cry for help she could possibly make. The creature did not have any sort of grip on Jennifer's arm, so she was holding onto the blanket for dear life. I grabbed the blanket and pulled as hard as I possibly could, but the creature did not move an inch. She let out the worst noise I had ever heard in my life, a high-pitched screeching noise that felt like it lasted minutes. It forced me to drop the blanket and fall to my knees beside the window and cover my ears. As soon as the noise stopped, I stumbled back towards the window, but when I looked out, any trace of the creature and Jennifer was completely gone. I was frozen with shock for a moment. All I could think about was the impossibility of what I saw and if I'd ever see Jennifer again. I was able to snap out of it just long enough to call the police and give them a vague description of what I had just witnessed. After what felt like hours, 2 officers showed up to the apartment. They asked me if I had touched or moved anything in the bedroom since the incident, and I reassured them that I had not. "Did Jennifer have any enemies? Anyone that would want to harm her in any way?" One of the officers asked me as I sat on the floor by the bedroom door with my head in my hands. "What? No. She was polite to everyone she ever spoke to." The officer wrote something down in a small notepad. "Look, officers, I know you must deal with insane people all the time, but I know what I saw, and it was not human." "How could a person kidnap someone out of a 3rd-floor window?" I said loudly, trying very hard to hold back tears. "All right, son, we're going to need you to calm down," one of the officers said as he gestured to the other officer to stay with me while he searched the room. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes. I felt a degree of safety with the officers around, and I nodded off to sleep. It was not long until I awoke to the sound of the officer in the bedroom calling out to the one that was still watching over me. I started to stand up to follow the officer, but he gave me a sharp look and gestured me to remain seated. I tried desperately to hear the conversation they had through the wall, but they spoke in almost a whisper. After the faint chatter stopped, the 2 officers stepped out of the room together and asked me to stand up. When I did, one of the officers handed me a small burlap pouch with a rubber band around it that kept it closed. "This was under your bed. Do you have any idea what this is?" the officer said, pointing to the bag in my hand as I was starting to remove the rubber band. "No, not at all," I said in a confused tone. When I finally managed to get the rubber band off, the pouch blossomed open, and I was able to see what was inside. The bag contained a bone that looked like it belonged to some sort of small animal, a burnt-out match, 3 strands of hair, some sort of flower, and what looked like human teeth. I was extremely confused by this. Did this belong to Jennifer? Why was this hidden under the bed? The officers asked again if I knew about or had anything to do with this pouch. I told them that I had never seen it or anything like it before. They assured me that they would find out where it came from and identify whose hair and teeth were in the bag. I saw the officers out of the apartment and immediately called my mother and told her I'd be staying over there for a while. After explaining what happened to my mother, she was in as much shock as I was. She told me that she was glad I'm okay and that I should get some rest. I heeded her advice and was back in my old bedroom for the 3rd time. I was woken up in the morning by the sound of my cell phone ringing. It was one of the officers that came to the apartment. He told me that he'd like to meet with me and wanted to know where I was now. I gave him the address and he was at my mother's house within the hour. He asked me if it was okay to speak about this in front of my mother, and I assured him that it was okay. I never expected to hear what he told us next. The police department had forensics take a look at the pouch that he had found. He told us that the small bone most likely belonged to a cat. What I had thought was a flower was actually an herb that I later found out was used in ancient times to put someone into a deep sleep for sacrificial purposes. The teeth were very old and did not match any dental records. Worst of all, the 3 strands of hair in the pouch matched Jennifer, myself, and Michelle. It got worse. He explained to me that when they made this discovery last night that they sent officers out to her last known address. When they arrived, nobody came to the door, but they saw a light on in the house, so they kicked down the door and went inside. What they found was a room full of lit candles in a circle around a silver chalice. The chalice was filled to the brim with blood and had what they thought at first was a folded up piece of paper inside. CSI showed up and took all this into evidence. After running some tests, they determined that the blood belonged to Jennifer, and the piece of paper turned out to be a picture of me and her at the bar the night we met. Michelle was never seen again. I am posting this because last night I saw a shadow at the window, but this time, there were 2.